Hi, this is Curt and welcome to another edition of Fire Law Roundup.
Okay, so now we have an allegation in Kansas City, Kansas, right? We have an allegation, just a claim of race discrimination and retaliation. The facts are, somewhat disturbing if true. And again, these are allegations. This is not a case with decided decisions where we know what the judge held the facts are. These are just allegations. So I don't think we ever emphasize that enough, or can't emphasize enough. But here we have an African-American firefighter. Some of this sounds a lot like it did in one of our cases a week or two ago about making it hard to get promoted. And I'll talk about that because it's the exact same allegation. It'll sound familiar to you in a second. So here we have a couple of things. So first we have the firefighter saying, listen, during my employment, they've made it very difficult for me to do certain things. For example, they keep moving me from station to station intentionally and moving me to stations which have predominantly become Black. And I don't know what the percentages of African Americans are here or not to even discuss that. And they say that has an effect, an intentional effect. One, it makes it harder to get promoted, which is exactly what we heard a week or two ago from somebody. And they say, we don't get to bond. We constantly have to pick up our gear and move it to another station. And so he said that's one of the discriminatory things that have happened to him. And he said that there's been negative racist comments. I'm not going to quote him. There was a noose on his locker, which is nothing new. It's other allegations. We've seen it. He said he walked in once and people had a bunch of Nazi paraphernalia. So there's that, but then he also was a witness who testified in a proceeding with an individual named Harris who was awarded money, and he then claims that the retaliation got worse after the testimony. It was retaliation after he testified, discrimination beforehand, right? And I don't know, frankly, this doesn't matter, but it doesn't look like it was any worse than it was before. And it doesn't need to be, it just allows him to add another cause of action. He said he was disciplined, and I want to point this out. He says he was disciplined for social media posts that didn't violate the social media policy, whereas no white people were. And yet I look and I'm like, I don't see a First Amendment claim here. You would have thought he'd maybe add a First Amendment claim. But, the basic common making bad comments, taking action that results in discriminatory, harmful effects, treating me worse than you would white firefighters. He's got all of those allegations in. For those who are listening for the first time, when I say this, don't be offended. This is nothing new. And I say that not like it's no big deal. I'm saying it because how many times have we seen and heard these types of allegations? And just like the woman you're talking about looks at patterns on theft, it's almost, we should look at the same thing on discriminatory conduct, because at this point I'm saying we've seen them do this before, move you to stations. We've seen a noose on a locker. We've heard negative comments. And the problem here is not only that it's happening, the problem here is the allegation that this individual reported it to their lieutenant several times and nothing happened. That's a real problem. I'm not excusing the firefighters for making comments, of course, but once you're promoted to lieutenant, I almost feel like our oaths of office, as you raise your right hand, should be, and I'm going to take, allegations of discrimination seriously, of harassment seriously. I'm going to protect my firefighters from everything. Because we're constantly seeing lieutenants do nothing, of course, because they're brought up through the ranks.
Well, they feel like they want to be one of the guys, and I've seen it in my career. And every officer wants to be respected by their subordinates and so on. But some officers just take that to a degree that they're no longer really the leader. They're just one of the subordinates.
Yeah,
and that when we have a problem and they don't step forward to intervene. But again, we don't know we don't know.
These are just allegations.
Facts here. I honestly, when I read it, I thought it was a little thin on allegations. I really thought it was thin. The biggest concern here, or one of the biggest concerns, was that he has some sort of sensitivity to light, and that he was ordered to turn the light. I mean, really? I mean, we're going to federal court over something like that, but
he was disciplined as a result of not turning the light on.
Right. And again, if I have a sneaky suspicion that if I talk to the people who are personally involved, we're going to get a different story.
Of course.
You know, so I don't know. You know, some of the things, some of the complaints that we see, you know, have a little more substantive, factual allegations than this one. I thought this one was a little light, but the retaliation part really makes all of the little tiny things along the way. And I certainly don't mean something like people dressed up, you know, with Nazi symbols or nooses or light. I don't mean that, but those were remote from what he's suing for. And, you know, if I'm defending the city in this, I'm asking that they be struck. They're irrelevant. You know, they happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They're irrelevant. What's relevant is the retaliation that he's alleging and the specifics that happened within the EEOC's 300 days or 180 days prior to the claim.
And I'll tell you, the first thing that occurred to me, what I would do one way or the other, if I'm the plaintiff, I'm the defendant, you want to get the facts to how many African-American firefighters are assigned to one of those two stations, because that was a big claim. Sure. And how many are transferred, right? How many, what's the percentage in proportion to the percentage of African-Americans, whites, you know, how many white firefighters are transferred routinely between stations versus black? I mean, that one is easy to prove.
I'll give you another fact pattern here. If you have a 5-person company and all 5 everybody's in, nobody's on vacation, and you have a 4-person company at a different station, but somebody's on vacation, so they're running with 3 and you've got 5, there's going to be a detail. And right. One of those 5 is going to have to go. So was this one of those situations where they were detailing an extra person to another station? And that's a question. Why is, you know, maybe why is there a need for an extra firefighter at that station? Are they understaffed? They've got to run with 4, but they're starting with 3. Well, you know, you've got an issue at that station. Why aren't they at 4? So that's a whole nother administrative issue.
The choice of who you assign.
Well, it's usually, in my experience, usually done on a rotating basis. Okay, but
doesn't sound like it is here.
But when you have not been a good subordinate, okay, and the officer says, Brad, you're on the road, until you start housework when you're told, and you know, right. You're going to take all of the details, and those types of things happen. Okay, and it's got nothing to do with race. And I'm not saying I don't know what happened here, but I just, again, there was no allegation that he was transferred to the station for no reason. And if his company had 4 people and he was detailed out and another firefighter was detailed into his spot, that's a different scenario. And I think if I'm writing the complaint, I'm going to include that information in the complaint. And it just sort of glossed over. And when it's like when a client comes in, they tend to just gloss over certain facts that they don't want you to pay attention to. And it just seemed like there was a lot of holes in this complaint, like that, you know, why was he being detailed? Was it true? He made it sound like it was punishment, but it could be that they had extra people. The other station didn't, so they were going to be detailed over there. So at any rate, we don't know.
Yeah, maybe they don't have enough information yet. Maybe the lawyer's just saying, all I got to do is a prima facie case at this point, leave it for discovery. Maybe he was up against a deadline, so he could only do, you know, a short amount of, who knows? Right. But that's, you know, when it's early on in the case, this is what a lawyer is faced with. And, you know, and people, we've received a comment like, oh, we're being too harsh or not harsh enough on things. When lawsuits come into our desks, it is that impression that you need, right? We need to be asking those questions, making those, you know, kind of making the comments of, is this valid or not valid? And, you know, and what else do we need to know? So when a lawsuit comes across any defense lawyer's desk, the mindset you and I are using is what we say. It seems thin, it doesn't. Is our client telling the truth? Who's lying? You always want to ask these questions. So that's all we're doing now, even though we have no way of getting any answers.
Right. And we don't want to, please don't be reaching out to us with behind the scenes information either. We, you know, it's better if we can just talk about it without, you know, without our judgment being clouded. So,
right. You know, it's one thing being an armchair quarterback like we get to be, but to have to take criticism for it, that's where I draw the line.
Criticism is fine. That's, you know, but we don't want to, you know, start taking sides in these cases. So,
right.